Good evening and welcome to Hot Topics from the Soul. I'm so excited. It's the 1st of February. I have my co host along with me.
And good evening and happy February 1st. And am very excited as we enter into this new month, a month that has quite a few themes. Not only do we have Black History Month, but we also have the month of love, Valentine's Day, along with a lot of other things. And I love the kind of the fact that we are going to start off talking about love. And so I'm excited about what we're doing and the guests that we have tonight.
Right. It's stages of love. Every
Yes.
woman wants to know what's on the hearts of men and why can't they find a man and why is it so hard? Why is it so tough? But it really isn't that hard. So there's different expectations, different levels. A lot of times women have this long list of everything she wants her man to be, from finances to how he looks, the type of job he has. And I think the expectations are so high out there that they actually miss out on some really great men.
I think you're exactly right because the fact oftentimes women receive their information from sources outside of themselves, what is
Mm.
pop culture, what is trending, what is popular. And for many times I think they can't distinguish between what is fact or what is fiction, what is fantasy versus what is reality. And you're right, they miss out on great men because they allow perfect to be the enemy of good.
Mm. That's deep, Dr. J. I'm so
Absolutely.
excited. And so we want to give as much time as possible to hear from these two gentlemen that have agreed to share with us and give us some information from their point of view. So you can introduce our first guest.
Okay, we'll see who we want to have up first today. Uh, I want to bring up Winfred Dorsey. Why don't we bring him up first? I've had the opportunity of knowing Winfred Dorsey for a number of years. Winfred is a very unique brother. He is a motivational speaker. He is an entrepreneur. He has worked in the field of dealing with the broken, the least lost and left out. He's dealt with men that are returning back from incarceration. But one of the things that underlines him is the fact that he is a tremendous father. He is passionate, has beautiful twin daughters. He is a divorcee, but he has exemplified the ability to be resilient and to bounce back in life, not allowing what may be interpreted as a failure of his past to cripple his future.
Awesome. Welcome, Winfred.
Hello, glad to be here.
How are you this evening?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. No complaints at all. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, Dr. J said you're a divorcee. So how long were you married?
Who, me? Like 16 and a half years.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
married 19 years. I separated at 17 and married 19 years, and then waited another almost 19 years before I remarried again.
Okay.
Well, say thank God for her patience, her resilience, and her grace.
Amen.
Because that's a long time. I think with us brothers, we generally don't look to be, if you would, that long in between. But it's kind of like what we started off with. Oftentimes, I think women are seemingly a little bit more careful and they become selective. And not that you shouldn't be, but the reality is, once again, a lot of the lists that women have is based upon what's popular. Unfortunately, reality shows have ruined women's ability to think for themselves because they're living out somebody else's reality, or what I like to call a scripted fantasy that is seen on a television screen. And oftentimes they will miss a good brother, a great brother, because they allow perfect to be the enemy of good. And when perfect is the enemy of good, you'll miss out on a brother who might not have all the finances you're looking for, who might not have all those things, but what he has proven to be is resilient. What he has proven
Hmm.
to be is compassionate. What he has proven to be is thoughtful. What he's proven to be is attentive. And so oftentimes we'll miss out on great qualities because at the end of the day, we know you can have money and still be unhappy. You can have all the tangible things and still be empty inside. So I think it's important for women to also understand men and understand what men are looking for and what men need oftentimes. And And so I think we live in a day and time. It's not a matter so much of what you bring to the table, what you bring to the table. It's what we bring to the table. And what we bring to the table, listen, there's a meal. I never have sat to my table and just had all beans. I got green beans, tomatoes, I got cabbage, bread. You have
You name
everything
it.
because it takes all that to make a meal.
Well, Winfred, after your divorce, tell us, can you share with the audience how it was beginning again? Because one of the misconception is that men don't hurt, they don't feel when they're leaving a relationship. Can you expound on that, please?
Yeah, that is a misconception. That is a lie. Men hurt. We cry. We go through things, but the issue, the thing of it is that we don't express ourselves the way women may express themselves.
Hmm.
Women may be, oh my God, but men, we internalize things, which I don't think personally is healthy. We should be able to have conversations. We should be able to talk about our successes and our failures at the same time within a relationship. But unfortunately, we don't do it. We don't do it enough. We don't say, "Hey, man, this happened to me, and I did this or that happened," and be able to talk about it and move on graciously. I won't say graciously, but just move on and get healed from that past relationship.
Hmm.
And how important would you say that, because you're right. We as men, we do hurt. And here's something that may be a startling revelation for people. We hurt even when we own up to whatever wrong or whatever part we had in it. We hurt. There's a degree of men who recognizes, man, I messed up, or I could have done that better, or
Hmm.
man, I wish I'd have listened in time. Now, to
Hmm.
reconcile with that is one thing, but by the same token, you grow from those things and you don't look to have that as a noose around your neck for the rest of your life. You grow
Hmm.
through it because we often say it's not enough to go through if we don't grow through what we've gone through.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
we have to sometimes take that permission because society doesn't always give us permission to do so. Society oftentimes want us to stay where our last failure was. People will bookmark you at the point of your last failure, at the point of your last mistake, at the point of your last unsuccessful relationship. And as men, we have to really take that inventory of ourselves because we're dealing with our own guilt. We're dealing with our own hurt and our
So,
own
Winfred,
pain about it.
speak about that. Share some of that with the audience.
About guilt. Yeah, you know what, when you are a man of God, people say when you're a Christian and you believe in God, and divorce is just a sin from the pits of hell, and you should not do this. You should not divorce, or you should not go through certain things. But however, we have pain, the pain and scars of a relationship where it's just, it gets difficult. And one thing that keeps a person, and I tell clients this in recovery, that will keep them out longer is guilt and
Hmm.
shame. It will keep them out longer because those voices in your head will tell you things like, you know what, you messed up and you'll never come back again. You know what, people will never forgive you again. You will never be restored to that place where God had you. Everything, you know what, you have just jacked your life up. And that guilt and that shame will paralyze you and keep you in a space, on a place that's extremely difficult many times for people to come out of. But you have to come to a place where you're able to regurgitate all of the nonsense, where you're able to speak to someone and they're speaking to your heart and let you know that, hey, you did what you did, you've owned what you've owned, you've gotten your forgiveness. Now the next thing you need to do is to forgive yourself. And that's the hardest thing in the world to do, is to forgive yourself. To hold yourself captive of something that God has released you from, and to
Hmm.
hold you captive, even if the person that you've wronged, they forgive you, you still hold on to that guilt and you hold on to that shame, and those voices in your head will continue to keep you in prison, lock you up, and if you're not careful, it will throw away the key.
When you
Wow.
love someone so much and you try, there's a lot of men and a lot of women that stay together for the children's sake.
Hmm.
When is there a point of saying it's enough? I need to push back in order for me to be who I am and for you to be who you are.
When it's enough is when it starts to infiltrate the home space to a point to where the children are really affected by it. The children see the verbal confrontations. The children see the physical confrontations. The children see all of the things that they should not see. When it gets to that space, in that place, it's time to have a come to Jesus moment. It's time to sit down and somebody has to be the adult in the room and say, hey, listen. We cannot continue to go on like this because what has happened, the things that you and I are engaged in, the things that we've done, it's starting to spill over into our girls or our boys or our children now. And so we have to back up, back away from it, deal with our own personal issues, insecurities, or whatever, selfishness. We need to deal with that so it will not affect our children as much because divorce itself affects them. And so now we're going to continue to just be in a house full of toxicity and violence and crazy stuff. And things are going to be far worse than they could ever be if we sit down like adults, have a conversation with ourselves, and then have a conversation with your children and let the children know, say, hey, listen, mommy and daddy are separating, mommy and daddy are divorcing, and here's why. It's not your fault, nothing you've done, because what we don't want to do is to have the children to think it's me. I'm the reason why mommy and daddy are not together. I'm this and that. No. We have to have that conversation with, especially if they're old enough to if they're old enough for us to have
Yes.
that conversation with them, because I've had that conversation with my girls to let them know, hey, this is the reason why, this is what's going on. And I try to keep them in the loop with some, not adult stuff, but with things that I can talk or to convey to them as children.
Wow.
When is love not enough?
When is love not enough? I
You
guess
know,
love is
because
not.
you can love someone because of what they've meant to you over the years. You
Mhm,
can love someone because of the things that you've built. But when love is not enough to keep you there, to make you, to allow you to stay in a situation that where you can come together and truly love one another, because that's why I said there are different expectations, there's different stages of love. You can love someone but not be in love with them.
mhm.
So when is that not enough?
When is love not enough? I guess love is not enough when it has gotten to that point that we just discussed. Love is not enough then. But I believe love is, and when you say being in love and loving, when you're in love with someone, you invest in them. When you're in love with someone, and even people that you're not in love with, you make investments. But it's in regards to relationships, you just have to. If you get to a place to where you're investing in a relationship and you're not getting a return out of that relationship, love is not enough anymore. Love is not
Wow.
love is not enough anymore. It has gone and grown away, however we want to put it.
Thrown away.
It has grown away. It has.
It's interesting that you use that terminology because in many ways, love does have stages.
Mm,
Uh, you know, new love, fresh love, oftentimes is filled with excitement, novelty, sometimes a bit of infatuation
hmm
of the unknown that is
hmm
ahead. And that is new love. That's new stages of love. We focus on our similarities. Oh, she like brown, I like brown. She like red, I like red. And those things are nice. And those that stage of love will lead us to a certain place. But somewhere along the line, love has to mature to being more than just an emotion, more than just a feeling. It has to become, if you would, a manifestation of practical living.
hmm
How do we do life together? How do we
hmm
navigate together? How do we make decisions together? How do we react to situations that occurs in our lives? Because I don't believe that people just grow apart. I do believe that what happens is that they run out of the energy to adapt, to adapt, to be resilient enough to adapt. Because as we grow older, even in our physical bodies, things changes, right? Things change. I mean, I can't run as fast as I used to. I can't lift what I used to lift, and a lot of things change there. So I make I make adaptations because the fact things are changing. And so often when we deal with love, it's not always that willingness, and it's not always that, if you would, that presence of mind that I need to make some adaptations. Why? Because what worked in those first few years might not be working right now because life has happened to us. And so are we willing to make that turn together? Are we willing to make that adaptation? And if we're not willing to, then love definitely seems like it's not enough. Because
Mm-hmm.
it's not that I don't feel for you. It's not that I don't care for you. It's not that I don't adore you. It's not that I don't appreciate you. It simply seemed to be that we're dealing with some other things. There are things now that I'm less tolerable of, or I have become more irritable at this stage. And the reality is can we give each other enough grace
Mm-hmm.
to recognize that we're at a place right now? We're at a stage right now. We've had a series of things to happen that has caused me not to feel so jovial about this thing here. And if we address it, can we prevent ourselves from going over that cliff that we call growing apart?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think if we
I
grow
see the
apart,
preachers coming out, Dr. J.
so the growing in love is a great
Okay.
part, as important as growing apart.
Okay.
Yeah, that was I heard a man say, "For God so loved that He gave." Love is a verb. It's action.
Mhm.
It's action. It's doing something. It's action. It's showing a person. And growing out of love, I think that in regards to, I think about investment and like investing money and things of that nature. Anytime we make an investment, we're looking for a return. And so I believe that in relationships, we, like you say, that first stage, you're infatuated. It's like Jovi. It's like, oh my gosh, she's so fine. Oh, he's so handsome and pretty. He got a six pack. Now he got a kid. All these different things. But we have to constantly, I believe, make those investments. I told my fiance, I said, listen, early on, I said, hey, I said, keep it fresh, keep it sexy, stay pretty. Don't get complacent. Don't get complacent. And I think complacency is an enemy. It's an
Mhm.
enemy to anybody, especially relationships. We get complacent, we get comfortable. We get comfortable with coming home and propping our feet up. And if they drink, they want to drink the six pack. If they want to pray, they go in there and they spend too much time doing something that they should not be doing. They spend too much time. There should be a balance in your relationships. And then that's that growing apart thing, because I'm investing over here when I should be investing over here. And I've heard a saying to say, I'm casting my pearls before swine. And then we get to the point to where we start to cast our pearls in gardens where we should not cast them.
We have another guest that'll be joining us, Winfred. So I need you to stay in studio because this is getting real good, and we want to make sure that we give a balance in the conversation. I know I'm the
Okay, you
only
better
female here, but I'm the devil's advocate. I'm going to be throwing things in there from a woman's point of view. So
go
if you
for it.
just stay in studio, we'll bring up our next guest.
Wow. Well, what a great beginning. And this is a great setup for our next guest, who happened to be our inaugural guest when we relaunched, over a year or so ago. And and we can say that Dr. Adrian Carter. This is such an amazing brother here. He's a transformational thinker. He is a brother who definitely has a cutting edge inside of his message. And of course, his book, one might call controversial, but I call it very powerful, when he said, let's get married and do everything we can not to make it work. And the fact that he unpacks so much about relationship between men and women, addressing traditional stereotypical roles that we have literally imparted upon ourselves and try to live up to it. So, Dr. Adrian Carter, welcome back to the show. We're always excited to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. You mean a lot to me. You're like one of my surrogate fathers out here. So thank you for having me on,
Honor.
Dr. Thicklin and Dr. Valerie. It's always a pleasure. Beautiful. Love your voice. And I'm loving the conversation so far. It's very interesting.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Now, your book Let's get married and do everything not to stay married,
Except it's let's get married and do everything except make it last.
except make it last. Now, what made you come up with that title?
Well, like your other presenter, I was married, previously married and divorced, and I was married for 9 years. And with what I experienced and learned from the marriage,
Mm,
it appeared to me as if it was like, oh, okay, we got married and did everything except made it last, right?
mm,
Wow. I love it.
Right.
I
And
love
so
it.
that became part of my learning, and it became something that I was able to put in a book to help others grow from, and to also really challenge the social norms, to take a look at the intersection of how conflict is created in relationships. Right, there are so many gender roles and norms and expectations and ideas that are brought into relationships, and all they're really doing is they're training you how to be in divorce. Right, so I think much of what our of the social strata, meaning much of what we're just taught in our daily lives and experience, even down from the church, I think it really teaches us, unfortunately, how to be in a state of divorce more so than it teaches us how to be in a state of unionship.
mm.
And so my book begins to dissect all of that and look at even scriptures that are used to uphold particular narratives within the church, to say, well, wait a minute, let's rethink how we are thinking about the scripture, because it's being used in a way that actually generates conflict. Right. And
Wow.
so I unpack those type of things, and use my personal story as an opportunity for others to learn from.
That's awesome. And I love the fact that you did that because, a lot of times we as women miss it. Men are wanting and longing for certain things. I have a lot of men friends, I have a lot of female friends, and my dear brothers are saying, I feel empty. You could be with someone and just still be empty. It's something that
Yeah.
you're longing for. There's something that you need. Can you expound on that? What it is that you have found that a lot of men are hungry for?
The same thing women want. That's the long and short answer of it, right?
Mhm.
I think part of the misalignment in the conversation is this idea that women want something that is so drastically from what men want, and that and we can't seem to get on the same page, because in some shape or form it can't be provided by the woman to the man, and the man can't provide it to the woman. Men are just as interested in feeling loved, cared for, nurtured, secure. And I'll even hone in on the word secure, right? Because it's I think it's traditionally the idea that man, provider and protector, provides the security. And even though we may not use the term, men as much want to feel secured within the relationship. But because we're not looking at the woman or framing the woman in the context of protector, then we don't attach the term security to her,
Mhm,
because we're not attaching protection to her. But the reality is, man wants to feel as protected and be as provided for and feel
Mhm.
as secured and loved. But what we've had is, in a lot of ways, very short-sighted conversations, or having the wrong conversations about the subject, which
mhm,
don't really fully explain or expand what things mean. For example, if the definition of provision is largely viewed as financial, then we've short-sighted what it actually means, and it's
mhm.
not a holistic enough definition that will appropriately recognize the needs of men as much as it does the needs of women. So those are some of the things that I definitely think men are just as are interested in, which is, it mirrors what human beings want, right? To be validated, to feel secure, to feel that there's a safe space within the relationship.
And I think in what you're saying is so true. And it lends itself to the earlier comment, because we do think along those lines and we do have short-sighted definitions. It then puts us in a place where I think definitely leads to divisive conversation, uh,
Yeah.
expectation that really slights the need of the other party here. Because so often I hear women, they will brag about, sometimes some of them will brag about their dad. Well, my dad was this, he was this masculine guy, and my dad didn't take this, and my dad didn't take that, only to recognize later on that in many ways your dad longed for some things that he wasn't getting neither.
Right.
That perhaps he was actually subscribing to the quote image, the narrative that had been given to them. So now you meet a brother, and I said this earlier, and we go back to your statement about provision. And so we hear, we hear the word provision, and we expect the brother, hey, brother need to be long. He need to have some long Benjamins. He needs to be loaded. He needs to be financial security, 401k, IRA, and everything else in between. And listen, and I say that not lightly. Sure, everybody wants economic stability. Everybody wants that. But my point is that that's not the end of the word provision. It's not the end of the word provision. And so inside of that, oftentimes I think that when women have their own lists of what they want, those things there, is often rooted in tangible things, externalisms. And as a result, I think they miss a lot of the other things that they really find themselves needing in a relationship. Okay, bro, bring home all the money, but what good is that if he provides no affection, no sense of compassion,
Dr.
no
J, you
sense of
keep going
understanding?
out.
What's that?
She said you were going in and out, but I could hear you well. I don't know what maybe, but
Okay.
yeah.
I said you keep going out. You so excited and talking all over the place too. You just like,
Yeah, but I'm hearing him just fine, Dr. Valerie.
okay.
I see your camera is seems like it's going out, but listen, this is technology, right? And and it does what it does. It goes in and out.
Okay. So
Absolutely. But
I'm
to
going
your
to
point,
step out and then we want to bring in Winford. Now, Dr. J, when we're communicating, I want you to be able to ask questions and do a dialogue.
Okay, absolutely. Okay, I think you're kind of frozen there. That might be what's happening as well, Dr. Val. You're frozen, but okay, now you're moving inside of that. So great, my brother. So this is very interesting here because we kind of segue from talking about the fact of oftentimes the way things are defined, provision, protection. Uh, Women today, they get a chance to look at a lot of reality shows and live in fantasy and these cultural norms that are being and messages that are being sent. And oftentimes they set their sights on men. They set their sights on what they want based upon those things. What say ye? How does some of those things actually perhaps opposes or contradicts really the reality of what a man can bring or what a man does bring?
Go ahead, Dr. Adrian. I'll follow up.
say that one more time.
How does oftentimes when women are subscribing to this whole narrative of what a man should be and what they wanted a man based upon oftentimes reality TV show, tabloid, what's out there, celebrity gossip and those things. And so now they bring these lists that are oftentimes filled with a bunch of externalism, the materialistic this, that, and other. How does that type of narrative and thinking, how does it totally opposes? How can it be very contradictory to the reality of what they probably really need and that they oftentimes overlook in a brother?
Yeah. So what tends to happen is um, we probably live in multiple worlds all at the same time. But I think we can say at least two that I could identify. Right. There is this world of social expectations, what we are told is culture, what we told are norms, what we're told is appropriate. And then there is what we really want or define for ourselves, and understanding that we come to in terms of who we really are, what our focus is, and how we want to show up in the world as our authentic self. In the world of norms and expectations, a large part of the conversation about relationships is centered around, at least for women, it's can be based on hypergamy. It can be based on upward mobility. It's based on security, that men are supposed to provide, which I think is an interesting dynamic, right? Because even
Mhm.
the idea of marriage in many ways, it's to provide a level of security, and in some ways, it's to provide security against the man. You want a man to secure you against other men. And but with all of those things being said and done, I think what ends up happening is eventually people come to a point of maturation where they understand what their deeper spiritual and emotional needs are, and that begins to counteract, or it counters what the norms, right, of expectations say that they should be looking for. And I think what both men and women go through is that particular transition where they learn to cross over that bridge of what the world says into coming to understanding on what they truly need in order to be successful. In that process, you're going to miss. Women are going to miss well-intentioned men. Men are going to miss well-intentioned women because they have not matured to that place that allows them to look at the things that they should be looking at. And just in my personal process, it's taken a lot of accountability, right? Because a lot of what is projected in that world that is outside of learning about our authentic self is that if you're not getting what you have been told that you should be receiving, which creates an expectation and an entitlement, that somehow it's failing you, not that you are not showing up as the authentic self and failing yourself.
Wow. Wow.
When you mentioned the word security, that just resonated with me. Women looking for security, and I think the first thing, many times, security, like you said, it's protect the family, I'm going to be a protector, this and that, and that men look for security too. We look for security in our vulnerabilities. We look for that in being vulnerable. Is this relationship secure enough that I can be vulnerable with you about certain things in my life, and that I can trust you with, and not have that thrown back at me and hit me. And so that, and with that thing of men being secure, having that security from his woman, he would respond in a different way. He would respond differently in certain instances. So I think security on both sides of the fence are very important. But I think the definition, that personal definition from male to female, is just different. They're looking for a certain type of security, and we're looking for a certain type of security. But as you say, as we develop and we grow and mature through relationships, we start to understand that I'm not as mature as I thought I was through my growing pains. And, we just grow through it.
So would that underscore when we start talking about the stages of love, the stages of development, the stages of maturity and understanding? Because none of us, if we're honest with ourselves, none of us start off where we end up. In other words, we've learned through trial and error, and we've also, as you said, Dr. Adrian, we have to learn to matriculate through life, through change of situation, because there is a period of time that I think you find yourself having to debunk those stereotypes, those roles, those things that you've been taught, and those things that you was trying to ascribe to, because what you discover is that they do not hold up because they're in opposition to your authentic self. And so that means that I think you have to be vulnerable to give each other permission to be authentic and understand that we may define things differently. And I love the way you put it. You talked about love, you talked about security, and we as men and women sometimes define it differently. And I think that's where a major part. Would you not agree that love is tough as Teflon, but trust is as fragile as China? Once it's broken, it's hard to be put back together again. Men don't define. We as men, we don't define, if you would, we don't define necessarily trust in the same way that women. Sometimes women say, well, can you trust him? The first thing they think about him stepping out, being unfaithful and infidelity. For us as men, oftentimes when we talk about a woman we can trust, we're talking about exactly what you were saying, Mr. Dorsey. Is this a woman that I can be transparent with? that I can be vulnerable with?
Right.
Can I entrust her with my most embarrassing moments, my most, that thing that I wouldn't tell anybody else? And when she violates that, it hurts in a deep way. In other words, it just hit different because of the fact we laid ourselves bare, hoping to find security. Once again, what you guys
Hmm.
need security? Yeah, we need security as well.
Yeah. And I do want to say, earlier you had asked Mr. Dorsey about love, the word love. There was that question about, do you run out of love? And I actually wanted to respond to that. I think um I don't I think we have made love this all encompassing, encapsulating word for everything that deals with our security, trust, respect, feeling cared for. We sum it all up, and then we say, love. Do you feel valued and appreciated, loved? And I think I think love in a lot of instances don't have much to do with the conversation. Um, it's not the most accurate descriptor of what is actually going on. I think people lose trust.
Mhm,
I think people lose faith,
mhm,
Hmm.
right? I think people lose feeling secure, right?
mhm.
You begin to not, you lose a sense of safety. And those things begin to put cracks in the door, cracks in the ceilings, cracks on the floor. I think what love does, because love covers a multitude of sins, is love becomes the plaster that allows you to repair. But because we keep on using the term love in place of the actual problem or challenge,
Hmm.
then we no longer see love as the solution. We've made love the problem.
Hmm.
Right.
I think that's prolific to understand, though, because
Absolutely.
what we do when we make love, when we replace the language with love and call love something else, or we're calling something else love,
Else love.
we are then losing the capacity to fix, right? Because we have miscalculated. It's almost like, if the bleach is supposed to clean, but you've mislabeled bleach as as something
Water.
else. Now you go pouring bleach on it, and instead of it whitening and purifying, cleaning, you're actually now using it to destroy, because bleach, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's important to understand, expanding our vocabulary to know how to really define what our challenges are. That
Hmm.
way we know how to properly apply love, because see, what happens is we don't run out of love,
Mhm.
right? I think we run out of those other things that we
Mhm.
name, and don't know how to then turn around and apply love, because we've said, well, we've run out of love. No, I love. And if I could go back to that place of love, love becomes the wisdom, it becomes the power, it becomes
Mhm.
the engine, right? That it becomes that Achilles that God is now able to show me through love, right? How to fix this situation that doesn't seem faithful, that doesn't feel as secure, that doesn't feel as trustworthy. So but if you look at how, if we change the language around it, we now enter into a space of solutions, with love being
Absolutely.
at the forefront of it, as opposed to being something that we ran out of.
I think that's absolutely powerful. And I think that it does matter. And what we're talking here is not semantics. We're talking about literally being able to clearly identify and clearly delineate between what is love and what isn't. And sometimes we have a tendency in our society and our culture to take a word and throw everything into one big cesspool, right? Okay, everything that's love, all that's love. No, it's not all love. They're ingredients. They're things that are happening. There are other elements there. But I like the way you put it. If we
Hmm.
mislabel it love,
Hmm.
then we've actually diluted
The
the
solution,
ability of love
right?
to repair it and to cover it.
Right. I'll take it a step further with that. I love the way you put that out there. If it's like going to the doctor and misdiagnosing something,
Mm.
Or you misdiagnose a person and you say that they're bipolar when they're not, or you say this person has this and they don't, and then you give them a prescription for something that they don't have,
Wow.
and we're misdiagnosing it. And so once we get a correct diagnosis of what's going on, it's not love, it's not love, it's trust,
Right.
it's unfaithfulness, it's this, it's not love. I still love you, I don't hate you.
Right.
And so we
Right.
shouldn't misdiagnose things. And once we can properly and correctly diagnose things, we can use that love, like you said, as that plaster to heal it.
Fix. Right.
Because
Wow.
when you mention God, so with that, God fixed the problem with what? Love.
Love. Bingo.
He fixed it with
Wow.
Bingo.
love. And he showed it, and we have to show it with love. I love that illustration, love being the plaster.
Oh yeah.
That yeah, I'm gonna swim in that. I'm gonna use that too, and I'm not gonna
All
pay
yours.
for it.
All yours. That's
But
what the community is for.
That's
For
right.
sure.
That's right.
Dr. Val, you've
Yes,
heard this very
yeah, I've been
stimulating
listening
process.
to y'all, and Dr. Maya Angelou says that when a person shows you who they are, believe them. But is it possible sometimes in a relationship you misdiagnose the energy or what that person is showing you because they're unlearned?
Mm.
Yes, I believe so. I'll jump out there quick and say yes. And I wouldn't necessarily say unlearn. And when you say unlearn, I'm not sure what you mean by
I'm
that.
saying
Or an
because they have
experience.
not been taught this because of their background, their upbringing. They haven't been taught how to serve, how to love, because they may come from a family where say, I wouldn't take that from him or I won't take
Hmm.
that from
Hmm.
her. Keep them in line, keep them in place, make sure your food is cooked and they have the babies and they run the house and they run that job, and then they be like, women sometimes say, I'm on overload, what are you doing for me? And then that space is created because there's a void because you're so busy working to make it work till you lose sight of what the reality is, lose sight of each other.
Hmm.
Wow.
Yeah. So while y'all are
Did I
thinking,
say a lot?
no, no,
You
no.
did. Yeah, yeah. Me processing. I jumped
Yeah.
out there first and said yes. Now I'm so.
Yeah, but I think while Mr. Dorsey's processing that, I think it's another matter of misdiagnosing, right? Mislabeling. I think what's happened is um, we have one of the things I talk about in my book is how we've mislabeled roles or confused or
Mhm.
and by confusing, conflated, brought together task and roles. We've made them one and the same thing when actually they're not. The people a lot of times when you hear people begin to talk about relationships, they'll list tasks that they want
Mhm.
accomplished, and they say that that's the role of a fill in the blank man or woman, and role is not the same as tasks. So even in the example that you gave, Dr. Valerie, I liked it because I'm able to use that to show forth the distinction. When we understand role is, in order to understand role, it requires your leadership capacity
Mm,
to be activated,
Hmm.
because role deals with understanding vision, purpose.
Hmm.
It speaks to you being able to uphold the enterprise or the mission and vision of that particular organization. And the tasks are done as a part of your role, but the task, while some of the tasks define your role, is more important to understand that your role defines your task, right?
Absolutely.
So there's that dynamic between it. But my tasks can change, but my role does not change.
mhm,
But when we define our roles by our task, then when
Mhm.
the task change, we think the role has changed.
Yes.
You see, so how does the task versus role change? One person begins to make more money, and if
mm,
he and when the money comes in, because the money is now shaped up differently. Well, if you define your role by the task of your occupation,
Ah,
then you're mislabeling your role, right? Your role doesn't change as a man or as a woman or as a father or as a mother. Uh, my litmus test for understanding role versus task is simplified to this. If I could pay somebody to do it, it's a task.
Hmm.
I could pay somebody to be a chef, to be a gardener, to be a maid, to be a butler, to be a driver. But the role though of me, for example, as a husband, as a confidant, as a place of support and security, I cannot pay the butler to have pillow conversations with you. Because in the pillow talk, there's security, there's safety, there's sharing. So when we are able to separate those two and understand how that works, then to your question, I think it brings more clarity to say how we're able to understand that, hey, the breakdown doesn't have to happen based on our tasks. The breakdown happened because we've lost sight of our role.
That's
You know, I like that, but I want to take it a step further too. When I think about the role aspect of it, where I think sometimes people get their roles twisted. For instance, if I can be a CEO of a company, right? But I'm a father at home. I'm not a CEO at home. And so we have to be able to separate those roles and be able to go from one thing to the next and not allow that to seep over into those lives and not allow that role. You know, I become the CEO of my house and I'm running my house like it's a company and I'm running my company like it's a house. And that'll get things all twisted up, you know.
I
So,
agree.
yeah, because you get people like I had a buddy of mine. He asked me. He said he's a minister, and he said, man, why is it such a challenge sometimes for my wife to not receive what I'm saying uh, when I'm at church, and then when I get home, I said, I think she tries to still see you as dad while you're in the pulpit, as opposed to being the pastor while you're in the pulpit and your dad at home. And we have to be able to separate those roles. And sometimes people, it's difficult for people, not everybody, for people to just separate those roles, who you are at work and who you are at home.
Mhm.
I think sometimes that when individuals are looking for someone, they're basically looking for someone because they're lonely at that moment. But when it comes to putting in the work for that relationship and laying aside who you are, like when I'm an executive woman. I run my businesses, I have nonprofits, I have a bank account, and all these things. But I was missing someone to share it with, someone that I could, be myself with, unveil who I am behind the suit. So I think that a lot of times relationships fail when they're two working individuals is because sometimes the woman don't want to put on the dress and the man don't want to put on the
That's
tie,
right.
so you bump heads. So I think
Mhm.
you have to really be mentally ready for the sacrifices ahead. And the sacrifices aren't hard because if you really love that individual, it should be you should wind up being best friends. Guess what? Best friends, you do anything for them. They
Hmm.
call you, you right there. You when you're hurting, they know it. So if you become each other's best friend, you'll be able to walk that journey out so that their relationship can build and grow.
Hmm. Yeah,
Wow.
I'm talking
I
because I
like
found that.
that.
And, and,
That
and
was
that's
so
a beautiful
deep.
thing.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing. So when we start talking about stages of love, you know, I think it's safe to say our maturity also will detect, will basically determine how we get to those stages, or if we get to those stages. You know, sometimes we sometimes we compete for our own limitations. We complete. I mean, we compete to hold on to all those things that we were told that we couldn't do and what shouldn't be, and if we compete for them, we generally will get them. And I think when we do so, we negate the ability of a possibility of truly growing. How do we mature? How do we go from the next stage? How do we adapt? I think there's resiliency that's important, there's adherence that's important, but I think the ability to recognize in the moment where we are in the moment and don't allow any particular moment to be the, oh boy, that's it, boy, this moment went south, it's all over with, blow up the whole experiment. No, I think our maturity, I think we have to mature to that place. And it's no different than a person who gets all excited about the wedding. The wedding becomes the destination. The wedding, we spend money on the wedding. We have all the things on the wedding. We have do all the things about the wedding. And people prepare for a wedding and invest in a wedding, but they don't invest in the marriage. And so they get the event, but they don't get the institution that is meant to evolve, that is meant to grow. God knows, boy, you feel the pain after the wedding, boy, when you start talking about those bills and things you done paid and out there did, and all the folks are gone, nobody helping you pay nothing, and now you got to deal with the reality.
That's
And I
another
think,
show all in itself. All that money
absolutely.
you spend on that when you have to
Oh
live.
Jesus.
That's a
Oh
whole
Jesus.
nother subject for real.
Oh
But
yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. Oh
Dr.
yeah.
Adrian, can you share with the audience how they can find you and find your book?
I actually have a new book out. It's called Black Fragility.
Mm,
And that book focuses on the dynamics between Black men and Black women. And in that book, I write 5 letters to men, having a very direct conversation with them, and 5 letters to women, Black women, having a very direct conversation with them. Um, the subtitle of the book is, or the full title is Black Fragility, Addressing the Unaccountability of Black Men and Women in the 21st Century
mm,
to help to heal, encourage, love, and protect Blackness. And the reason
Wow.
why I felt that was important as a conversation to have is because too much of what we are, we cannot move further with all of the work that we're doing and hoping to do in the space of overcoming white supremacy, in the space of growing as a people and as a community, without also taking responsibility and accountability for who we are and how we show up in different spaces
mm,
when it comes to our um, our family nucleus and to the community at large. And so this book tackles that particular issue. And they're very direct conversations. So that book, coupled with my previous book, Let's Get Married and Do Everything Except Make It Last, provides rich content on being accountable, rethinking how we think, and doing things differently. We understand at a personal level, right, that if we want to experience something different or we want a different outcome, we have to do something different. And these 2 books tackles that particular issue across the board, personally within our romantic relationship and within the community abroad. So if your listeners go to adriancarterspeaks.com, they're able to see the links to Amazon, or if they were to go to Amazon and just type in my name, Adrian N. Carter, my the books that are attached to my name will also come up. Please grab them. They're excellent reads. I've received amazing feedback about both books. The newest book, Black Fragility, came out last November, and the previous book, Let's Get Married and Do Everything Except Make It Last, came out in the previous year. Um, I really am not publishing separate books. It's all one book.
mm-hmm.
You know how to buy, but there's a book of
Yeah,
Mark.
you have a
You know,
series. Yes.
yeah, that's all I got going. I just got the book of Let's Get Married and Do Everything Except Make It Last, and then it continues on with Black Fragility and the other books that I'm working on as well. So thank you for the
Awesome.
opportunity to share about that.
Awesome. So you
Awesome.
have a relationship collections
Yes.
so that it can serve the total man. That is awesome.
Well, we
Winfred, do
have a
you have any book? Are you a published author?
No, not yet, but I'm working on it. I
I
am
know
working
you
on
got
it.
some stories in you. Anytime you
Oh
go through
yeah.
something, I'm telling
Oh,
you, when you live a certain amount of years, you got a story to tell.
oh, absolutely. I don't have I'm working on a book now as we speak, and I don't want to throw the title out because somebody might try to, But
Yes,
anyway,
they'll
Absolutely. You keep
snatch
that
it.
title
uh,
to yourself.
yeah, and
Yes.
I'm working on that. But I also, like I mentioned, my fiance earlier, we have a great relationship. I think we have great chemistry together, and we're just having fun, and we're having fun, and that's a part of the investing in the relationship, investing in love, and doing fun things together. We have this thing that we're doing on TikTok. It's at the real DA underscore real Dorsey's Dorsey on TikTok, and we're just doing little fun videos. We're dancing, we're singing, we're just having a lot of fun, and just showing people that you can still have fun. Please have fun. Love
Yeah.
God, love people, love God, love people, be excellent. And the last one, man, have fun.
Mm.
But
So
that's been
was that your
tremendous.
closing remark?
Is that your closing statement? I think she's asking.
Oh, my closing statement.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's my closing statement.
Dr. Adrian?
www.adriancarterspeaks.com. Go there and invest in the work that I'm doing. I'm quite sure it's going to be worth it for you.
Dr. Val, we have definitely a question that many people talk about growing apart. How do you make sure this does not happen? I think we may have addressed it earlier about making sure that we don't necessarily grow apart. We talked about adaptability. We talked about being present. We talked about being accountable inside of that. Because I think one of the worst things that can happen is two people in a relationship and both of them waiting on the other one to make the adjustment rather than
Yes.
meeting each other and recognizing the fact that sometime the road bends. And when the road bends, we must bend with the road. And if we don't bend with the road, then guess what? Somebody's going to be still going the way they were going, and they're going to miss. They're going to miss out. We're going to have a separation simply because of the fact of we were unwilling to recognize, identify the things that are bringing about these changes and to be adaptable. Because I think resiliency is so important, being able to be resilient and to be able to adhere to the new findings of where we are. And I think that's important. And so that's my spiel about being able to make sure that we don't grow apart. And I think we have to not want to grow apart. What can we do to make this work? And understand the key word is we.
Well, I'll tell you what I've done. Like, I'll be married 6 years now. And with me and my husband, I always say to him when we wake up in the morning, you see, you have to kind of train them what you want. So every day he has to kiss me. And
Oh,
he'll walk by me and I say, "You haven't kissed me today." And he's like, "I kissed you this morning." I said, "I didn't feel it." So he has to kiss me again.
yeah, yeah,
And then I say to him, "I love you more than I loved you yesterday."
yeah.
Wow.
And see, I think that's some of the things you can do to keep the fire, but that same person that you walk down the aisle with, that same person that you say you love, allow them to feel that same way as you did while you were dating. You said
Mhm.
silly little goofy things then. It doesn't hurt you to give a man flowers or buy him a gift. I'm always ordering something or buying something. He said, "Babe, what's coming now?" And I said, "Oh, that's for you." And he was like, "Oh, it is?" So, those simple things like that to say, "I care." Because I think so, you men, you can chime in on that. You just want to know that you care, that you matter, that you appreciate it.
I like
And
that.
my
Yeah,
husband
yeah,
he certainly
yeah,
does that for me. So that's one way to stay together so you don't grow apart.
yeah. And and I call that consistency. We have to be consistent, and we have to like dating. If we need to have times say, hey, we're gonna date once a month. I'm gonna take you out. We're gonna do something. If you have children, make sure they're over at Big Mama's house or Uncle Willie and them. Somebody, and that has to be done. And nothing should interfere with that. That little kiss in the morning that your husband gives you, that's a little investment. Those are little investments. Those are little investments to keep that relationship going. And we cannot not continue to do that throughout the relationship. We have to, it has to be reciprocated. And if
Mhm.
not, eventually something is going to, and then you're going to grow apart and you're going to grow out of love. But if we constantly make those deposits. We should be in good shape 55, 60 years later.
Yeah, and I understand that some men just not into that. They're just not into like, okay, I'll
I don't
kiss you
agree
in
with
the
that.
morning and something. I guess some of them not into that, but like I said, you show them how you want to be treated and vice
Right.
versa.
Well,
So
you know,
just like
some
you warm that heart, you need to warm it to keep it going.
right. Some men are not into that, but we into what we into. When we trying to be into, we try to get into. So you want to get into, you need to give me a kiss so you can get into. Y'all know what I'm talking about, grown folk. So don't tell me.
Get
Let me tell you,
into it.
that's right. So don't tell me. We say that all some
Like
men.
you're trying to
It's
put your
just,
head through the camera,
oh, I'm about to go ahead. I'm about to do it.
trying to get into it.
Yeah. I mean, we're adults. And these are adult conversations. So, but I get what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's
But
good feedback.
oh yeah. So,
Yeah, y'all have
we
got to come back as well because there's so many stages of love. I would just love if you would come back because we also need to talk about what happens if there's something wrong with your partner. Do you fall out of love because he has an illness or he has pain or something is going on with his life? Suppose he loses job or she loses her job. Suppose something has happens with the children and you have to look after them. There's a lot of dynamics that goes in this game called life, and we have to be mature enough and mature enough to go along with the shift, but still keep that love and still keep
Yeah.
that focus so that we can continue to be one.
I want to quickly say to the question, booty rubs are very important. People underestimate the importance of booty rubs for both men and women.
oh yeah.
Men may not even vocalize that, but there are three parts of the booty: the top, the middle, and the lower third. And the dynamic of the relationship is really based on which part of you are allowed to engage. So if you want to help maintain the relationship and not grow apart, learn how to engage all three areas of the booty as is appropriate throughout the day. Booty rubs is everything, and we don't put enough focus on talking about booty rubs. I think it's so important. I wrote about it in my book. Let's get married.
Okay.
I
Everything is
kind of figured that.
right. I actually wrote a chapter about booty rubs. And the second thing is, a lot of times what I felt happened in the feedback that we got, we got feedback about touch, about acts of service, about gift giving, and and really it boils down to communication. It's a
Mhm.
communication issue, learning
Mhm.
how to communicate, whether verbally or non-verbally. And a lot of times when shifts are happening in the relationship, um, we it becomes a difficult conversation to have. So people don't know how to so freely speak. But when you're having those challenges, rely on the evidence within the relationship. I'll close with that. The evidence, if you're feeling that something's going on, what has the evidence told you? Is this a pattern of behavior? Right. And then learning how to have the conversation, not in a way that is accusatory, but whatever the situation may be, and there could be 100 different scenarios that we could come up with. But I think it's just important to study how to have communication, have the conversation, because most people don't. They think talking is having effective communication, and it's not.
Mhm.
You're just talking. And a lot of instances, you're making the situation worse.
Talking
Wow.
loud, saying nothing.
And so the question on the
That's that
table,
old
my
song.
brothers, is the fact of being able to come back and do a part two. Is that what question I heard on the table?
Hey, you know how to reach me, sir. Anytime,
Oh,
anywhere,
for sure. For
wherever
sure.
you
For
call,
any
I'll be there.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Whenever you call me, I'll be there. Yeah, yeah.
So those of you that have some questions that you would like us to ask these gentlemen, because like I said, we women always want to know what's on the hearts of men. You can email me at soultopics@gmail.com. That's soultopics@gmail.com because I do understand that some do not want to physically put it on the YouTube or Twitter or any of the social media platforms because it shows who you are. So you can email me privately at soultopics@gmail.com. And we appreciate you for joining us this first day in February. And we have few more weeks to go with the shows. We'll be talking about Black history things as well as this, but I felt it was important to talk about relationships because a lot of individuals go through depression. It's just not women, it's just not men. Individuals go through depression in February because the whole world is buzzing about Valentine's Day, and you don't have a Valentine's, and then you get depressed. But guess what? It's better to be alone than to wish you were.
Boom!
And
Boom!
that's it for Hot Topics from
We
the
dropped the
Soul.
mic on that one. Boom!
Join us next Tuesday on another Hot Topics from the Soul. Good night and God bless.
God bless.
God bless. Thank you so much.